The trouble with old steam locomotives. This is part 10, refitting the water gauge and the check valve. The water gauge parts and the check valve, and also a pipe that's going to be fitted to the whistle, have just come out of the acid bath. So I don't want them full of acid. The answer to that is to flush them in some clean water. Once separated from their umbilical cord that held all the parts together whilst they were in the acid, it's now time for a further clean-up. The water gauge parts and the check valve are not commercial items. Once I polished up the gland nuts using my polishing spindle, they looked a bit better, but I can't help thinking that these are not very accurately made. In this clip I'm cleaning out all of the abrasive soap that I applied to the polishing spindle. I was going to make a pair of new gland nuts for the water gauge, as these are quite inaccurately made, so I got some hexagon bar stock and then it was over to the lathe. And unfortunately it's not working properly. I think it's the three-phase converter. It keeps switching it into boost mode, which applies a lot more power. And if I carry on like this, the motor will burn out, and I don't want that to happen, so I couldn't make the gland nuts today. A few weeks ago I spoke to a very helpful man at the company who make these transweight converters. His name is Pete Moss, and I'll give him a call on Monday and order some new parts. Here are the two gland nuts on the right hand side of the picture. The O-ring at the bottom was what was in there. I think it's just a rubber O-ring. On the left are two pieces of silicone rubber tubing. I chopped off a length of tubing. These will work perfectly, but in the end I decided to use a silicone O-ring from my box of silicone O-rings. This is the check valve, and it's badly marked. The top needs polishing and the part on the hexagon just needs cleaning off. I start off with a needle file, and then after a while I move over to some wet or dry sandpaper on the edge of the bench. The part ends up not being perfect, but a lot better than it started. You've seen the before. Here's the after shot of the check valve after I cleaned it up. First of all, I tried it in place, and I'm very pleased to say that it fits perfectly without a shim washer. In this clip I've applied some Loctite 542 and I'm screwing it tightly in place. It's quite rare for a boiler fitting to fit in the backhead bush and be precisely in the right place without a washer. All I need to do now is tighten the union nut to hold the pipe in place. Quite a lot of the video that I shot showing this function just showed my hands because I'm working in a very confined space. But in this clip you can clearly see that my trusty Barco spanner tightens the union nut without rounding the edges. And flush with success, I thought it would be a good idea to tighten the union nut that holds the injector steam pipe to the turret valve. I loosened this pipe when I removed the water gauge, but now I can put it back in place because I'm going to refit the water gauge. I hate to labour the point, for all the people who are forever having a go at me for using an adjustable spanner all the time. As you can see, a Barco spanner does not round the nuts. Time to refit the top water gauge fitting first. As I mentioned in a previous video, I'm reusing these fittings for a couple of reasons. The first reason being that they're made from phosphor bronze. And the second reason is I do not have any fittings of this size that use 3/8 by 40 threads. Normally water gauge fittings of this size would use 3/8 by 32 threads per inch. To tighten the water gauge fitting in place I'm using one of my larger Barco spanners, and to tighten it up I'm using a small spanner in the hole at the end. I'm sure a lot of my viewers will be aware of this technique, but just in case you didn't know, you know now. In these next few clips the camera angle makes it look like everything's not in line, but it is in line, and I use a piece of glass to line up water gauges. Some people use a piece of metal bar, but I use the piece of glass because I'm not going to stress it out anyway. Well, I am now. I'm using a needle file to score the glass and putting too much pressure on. And that's what happens. Luckily this time it wasn't too bad. So I carefully made the end square using my 1-inch belt sander, and here is a piece of glass fitted in the water gauge. This water gauge is definitely a contribution from the school of randomly made water gauges that look a bit strange. Why is the thread on the top fitting a lot longer than the one on the bottom? I've no idea, but I'm sure it will work okay in the end. I've made a lot of videos about how to fit water gauges, so I'm not going to labour the point on this one. I'm using a piece of copper pipe to hold the glass in the bottom of the lower fitting. Because now the gland nuts are fitted with silicone O-rings, it's very easy to lift the glass out of position, lift it out of the bottom fitting. Once I knew the glass was all the way down into the bottom fitting, I tightened the lower gland nut. Here I'm fitting the top gland nut, and once again it looks a bit wonky. Maybe it is, but I think it's the camera angle more than anything. The saving grace of this water gauge, apart from it being made from phosphor bronze, is that the holes in the water gauge are a good bit bigger than the glass. So in this case there is a bit of a margin of error. With the water gauge now securely in position, it's time to fit the 90-degree blowdown valve. All this is a 90-degree globe valve, and it's a very nice one too. I don't know where it came from. I've yet to make up the drain pipe, which will be a piece of 5/32 pipe to channel any blown down water away from the cab. By the way, I didn't paint the water gauge before I fitted it because the paint would only have been marked. I'll paint it later. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.